Okay, in this next unit, we're going to start investigating the circulatory and respiratory systems. And blood is what's traveling throughout the circulatory system. So today we're going to talk about blood composition. And composition is what things are made of. So why don't you pause the video and take a minute to read through the reading section on your own. Okay, so now after you read through that, let's read through it together. When we absorb nutrients from the food we eat and water from what we drink, we need a way to transport these materials to every cell in the body. We also need a way to move the oxygen we breathe in our lungs to all the cells in our body. Further, when our cells produce waste, we need a way to move those wastes out of the body. The circulatory is the system in the human body that transports all of these materials and many more around in our body. The circulatory system involves the heart, arteries, veins, capillaries, lungs, and the blood. Blood is a mixture of cells, gases, nutrients, and water. Red blood cells which transport oxygen make up about 41 to 44% of normal blood volume. White blood cells which fight disease and platelets which help the blood clot. And clot means to clump up. So if you get a cut and you stop bleeding, platelets are what help that blood to stop flowing out of your body. They help form that scab. They make up about 4% of normal blood volume. Finally, plasma, which is made up of water and nutrients, make up about 55% of blood volume. Okay, now for the listening portion of today, I want you to look at this first picture. So this first picture shows us a picture of a hematocrit. This is what blood would look like if you spun it down really, really fast in something called a centrifuge. And what it does is it separates all the cells to the bottom and the water and plasma on top. Now, there's usually three parts to a hematocrit. The top layer, and layer means when you have things separated, a section. The top layer is made up of the plasma. So on that top box, let's write plasma. You can see the spelling of it again up there, or we could just put P. Now plasma again is made up of mainly water, 90% water, and then, chemicals like nutrients, hormones, enzymes, proteins, carbohydrates, fats floating around, but then mainly water. So that top layer is the plasma layer. Now, the little white layer in between that yellowish and red layer would represent where the white blood cells and platelets are. It's called the buffy coat or the buffy layer, but we're just going to say that's where the white blood cells and plasma are located. So you can say white blood cells and plasma. And then finally, on the bottom there, we see the red layer, and that's where all the red blood cells are located. So you can see we should have many more red blood cells compared to white blood cells. So this is where the red blood cells are located. So this is what blood would look like, again, if we spun it down really, really fast. Okay, now on the bottom, what if we took some of this blood and put one drop of it on a slide and then looked at it under a microscope under high power? If you were to do that, this is probably what you would see. This is what a normal blood smear would look like. So we call this a blood smear. And it's really, again, just looking at blood under a microscope. So when you look in there, we see a lot of these little kind of circular, and I don't know if they look pink or red on your screen, but circular reddish cells, or maybe pinkish cells. All those are the red blood cells. So let's label one of those as an RBC. So I can just say right here, and really all of those are red blood cells. Okay, now in a typical smear, you should see lots of red blood cells. Okay, now looking around in here, I also see this one big kind of bluish reddish one. So this one big one here in the middle, that's a white blood cell. That's the thing floating around fighting off infection and performing some other tasks. So you should probably have about 1 to 3 of those in a typical blood smear. So that's a white blood cell. And then finally, these are kind of hard to spot, but you're going to see some little bluish dots. These really aren't cells. They're cell fragments, and they're called platelets. These are what help your blood clot, again, or clump. So this is a platelet. So if we were to look at blood under a microscope, we should probably see lots of red blood cells, a few white blood cells, and some platelets. Okay, let's move to the speaking portion. So there are many different problems that can happen in our blood that can be noticed by looking at a hematocrit or a blood smear. I want you now to talk with someone, anyone at home, even teach a younger brother or sister about this. Look at these two blood smears, and I want you to compare them to this blood smear up here, the normal one, and see if you can kind of talk with someone about what's going on. So why don't you pause the video, talk with someone about how these compare to the one above, the normal one, and then I'll come back and tell you what's going on. Okay, so in this slide, let's run through the three types of substances we should see in here. Do we see red blood cells? Yeah, we do. They're right here. But you know what? In this one, there seems to be far fewer red blood cells than in the normal slide. So I would say there's too few red blood cells. And we'll talk about later today what the name of that disorder might be. Okay, now down here, it looks like we got a lot of red blood cells again, but now we have way too many of these white blood cells. And I'm also not seeing too many platelets in here. So we could say too many white blood cells and too few platelets. Okay, now for the last portion of today, I would like you to write a paragraph now, 4 sentences, describing what is in blood and the function of blood. What are some of the things that blood does and what is in blood? And we're trying to focus on maybe these 3 substances, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, and then think about what they do. Okay, so that will be our language sheet for today.